allow you to unplug the drive from the computer, and the drives would continue to copy any disks you insert in them on your own.
However, this feature was also used by many copy protection schemes. In fact, many games used entirely foreign, non-standard disk formats.
Only track 18 needed to remain compatible with the Commodore format, just enough to load the directory and the first file. After that, the rest of the disk would be an entirely foreign format designed specifically for that game. And after a few years on the market, practically every piece of commercial software was completely dependent on the 1541 disk drive being exactly how it was. If you changed any part of it, it would break compatibility with hundreds or thousands of software titles. That includes the ROM code.
So while it would be easy enough to design a disk drive that would be compatible enough for users to load and save their own programs to disk, in order to be a commercially successful product, it would need to be able to load commercial games.
This presented a problem for third-party drives. They could copy the design of the motherboards easily enough since they were mostly off-the-shelf parts. The ROM code was the biggest barrier to creating a fully compatible disk drive. Some companies, like Accelerator Plus, simply copied Commodore's ROM code as is, and as you might expect, they were sued by Commodore for it. So they agreed not to use their own code, but what they really did was take the original ROM code and swap around some of the bits, which changes all the values to look like nonsense if you were to read the chip in an EEPROM programmer. However, in order to make the chip still work, they just swapped around the matching traces on the board so that it all ended up making sense in the end. Of course, Commodore quickly figured this out and sued again, eventually taking this drive off the market.
It's often discussed online that many of these drives, if not all of them, were targets of lawsuits by Commodore at one point or another, but the truth is, in my research, I was only able to find specific information about the lawsuit against the Accelerator Plus. So while it's very possible Commodore may have sued the Enhancer 2000 or the MSGT or the MSD drive, I just don't know for sure. It wouldn't surprise me, but I just can't find any information on it.
The Enhancer 2000 was a very common third-party drive that seemed to be mostly 1541 compatible, but there's not a lot to really say about this other than it's the only third-party drive that matches the color scheme of the red bit 64. And the last drive I have here is the blue chip drive. They actually made several different models, but this is one of the last models they made, and what makes it unique is that it's actually not a clone of the 1541, but rather it's a clone of the 1571. So this drive was targeted for Commodore 128 users, and it supports all of the features of the 1571. And there's one very important third-party drive which I have, so I'm going to let Robin from 8-Bit Show and Tell you all about it.
Hi, it's Robin from 8-Bit Show and Tell. I have here the Creative Micro Designs FD2000, which is a 3.5-inch high-density drive. It's much like Commodore's 1581, but that only accepts double-density disks. This also works with high-density disks. It formats the disk to 1.6 megabytes, which is almost 10 times as much as a Commodore 1541 can store on one disk size. The FD2000 is a little smaller than the 1581 in width and depth, and it has the same serial ports, allows configuration of up to 16 different device numbers, and is powered by 9 volts DC. Using the included FD Utilities program, we're able to partition the disk into several smaller 1541, 1571, or 1581 partitions, as well as program optional real-time clocking. There is also an FD4000 model available that uses the rare disks and can store 10 megabytes, but I don't have one of those. But I do have something even more rare. This is a dual FD2000. As far as I know, only 3 of these were ever made. You could almost call it a prototype, but it's more of a custom build that was used for disk copying. You can see how they include a disk, make master, for use only in the FD copier, a custom version of the FD2000. The case is kind of ugly, it's like a regular FD2000, and just added this extra bracket at the bottom here. And on the back, this was used by Buildstar for duplicating their monthly disk magazine. So it made thousands and thousands of copies very reliably for Lodestar. I'll be doing a more in-depth video about this disk drive in a future video on my channel, 8-Bit Protocol, so please subscribe.
Unlike 10 years earlier, by the late 1980s, compatibility was a driving force in the computer industry. Nobody wanted to produce products or even buy products that weren't compatible in some way or another. And because the vast majority of games utilized special disk formats and copy protection on the 1541 disks, that meant the 1541 or 100% compatible disk drive was a requirement for owning and using a Commodore 64, unlike IBM PCs, for example, which rarely ever used this sort of copy protection. In fact, by this time, most IBM-compatible games were more or less expected to be copied or installed onto your hard drive, for example. But this simply wouldn't be possible with hardware software because they were so heavily intertwined with the 41 disk drive.
And while I'm sure that made Commodore happy because they were able to sue other manufacturers trying to create 100% compatible Commodore drives, it also meant they sort of painted themselves into a corner because the Commodore 8-bit line would never be able to move beyond the 5.25 inch floppy disk, unlike competitors like the IBM PC, for example. And like I said, it's probably not the only reason for the decline of the Commodore 8-bit ecosystem, but it was certainly a contributing factor. And of course, that about wraps it up for this episode of Commodore History, so stay tuned for the next one, and as always, thanks for watching.
名称破棄四十に走れ。天使もしてない相手にだがまだ風ようがて